All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the 1883 Speaker Series. My name is Mike Wozniak and I serve as the Director of Leadership Development. Over the next 18 minutes and 83 seconds, we'll explore a new lesson in leadership and gain valuable insights to support both our personal and professional growth. For today's speaker, please join me in welcoming the Interim Dean of the Nistler College of Business and Public Administration, Dr. Patrick O'Neill.
Good afternoon. I arrived at UND in August of 1987 as a newly minted PhD and joined the Department of Economics as a tenure-track assistant professor. Now, after nearly 40 years, I'm still here and currently serve as the Interim Dean of the Nistler College of Business and Public Administration. Especially for any students who are here or listening, you might be thinking, 40 years, this guy's really old. Let's hope he has something interesting to say and doesn't just tell us 1883 dad jokes. No promises. While preparing for today, I watched some of the previous talks, and many of the past speakers provided a cool title for their talk, so I figured I'd better do the same. I chose the title, Tales of an Accidental Leader, because sometimes leadership opportunities present themselves without you seeking them out. I want to share with you some of the leadership experiences I've had and some lessons I've learned along the way. My first accident, becoming a department chair. When I arrived here, within a couple months after being here, some senior faculty came into my office and said, someday you're going to be a department chair. And I thought, I don't even have tenure. I've got to get tenure, I've got to be an associate professor, I've got to be a full professor, then maybe you can come back and talk to me. So all that happened. And then one day, our department chair had some challenges and we had an interim chair. And the interim chair came into my office one day, knelt down in front of my desk and said, I don't want to be chair anymore. Please, please, please submit your name to be department chair. And I thought, okay, they told me it would be my turn someday, and I did. And then we had a department interview where I was with all the members of the department, and they were asking me questions about, there was two of us that applied, and the first question I got was, why do you want to be department chair? And here's what went through my head. Well, I don't really, but you, who are asking me this question, came into my office, knelt down in front of my desk, and begged me to apply. So I did not say that. I don't know what I said, actually, but I was chosen. And then afterwards, I went to the guy who came in to me. I said, well, how did you pick me? What did I say that was so much better than the other person? He said, well, what the other person said was because I want the extra money. So whatever I said had to be better than that. So I became a department chair. So the lesson that I learned from that was interviews matter. I really had no idea that I was going to be interviewed. I should have prepared, but I didn't. So as I was thinking about this is kind of an obvious lesson now, but it wasn't to me then. My second accident, becoming a helper associate dean. So I'd been department chair for 10 years, and I decided that was enough administrative work, and I went back to being a faculty member, tenured full professor. Early on in the first semester, when I was not any administrator, Friday afternoon, I got called down to the dean's office, and I'm in a meeting with the dean and the associate dean. And they're asking me not to be an associate dean, but to kind of help out. When they needed some help, they would call me. And so I thought, well, I'm not sure I really want to do that because I'm kind of enjoying not having any administrative responsibilities. And at the time, the associate dean sitting right next to me looked at me and said, Pat, I'm sick and I need your help. And I thought, what I said was, well, it's Friday afternoon, I'll let you know on Monday. So I went home, told my wife, and she said, you know what you're going to say, don't you? And I said, yes, I know I'm going to do it. And so I just called him that night and said, okay, I will help. So the lesson I offer from that is answer the call. When you're asked to serve, please do so. The next stop on my journey, I'm calling an incident rather than an accident, because I actually applied to be a part-time associate dean this time. And I'm in the interview, so I had been the helper associate dean, and that the helper, or the person who was associate dean, actually had to take disability and stop working at the university, so I kind of became the whole associate dean for a while. But then the dean at the time decided that he would have 2 part-time associate deans, and he had interviews. So I'm interviewing with him, and he asked me, on a scale of 1 to 10, how hungry are you for this job? And I said, 6. And he said, you know, that's kind of disappointing. I thought you might say like 8 or 9. And so backstory on that is, and so what I said to him, I had applied a couple times while I was department chair to actually be associate dean and not been selected. So what I said to him was, his name, you have asked me this is the 3rd time you've asked me this. On a scale of 1 to 10, how hungry are you? Each time I've said 6. I don't need the associate dean job to feel like I've had a satisfied career. And then I thought, what can I say to him that maybe I get picked this time? And I said, so I'm still saying in terms of how hungry I am, it's a 6 out of 10. But if you pick me for this job, I will give you an 11 out of 10 in effort. And so I'd finally figured out how to answer the question, and I was selected. So, similar lesson to my first one, interviews still matter. So, and this is something that, you know, looking back on it, I think, well, again, these things ought to be obvious. They're obvious now, but they weren't in the moment. My next accident was becoming an HLC champion. So most of you know, maybe you don't all know, HLC is a Higher Learning Commission. It's the agency that accredits all of UND. And every 10 years we have to be reaccredited. So we recently were, maybe a year or 2 ago. The prior decade to that, I was given the opportunity to be one of the 3 people in charge of that entity or that project for the entire university. And it took like 3 years of work, and 3 of us started, and then we got more and more. There's probably 100 people all together. So the way that accident happened was I was called over. Provost asked me to come and visit with him. So I was associate dean at the time. And he said, we're starting up this project, and I would like you to be one of the 3 people, 2 faculty, 1 administrator, to help organize this whole thing. It's going to be like a 3-year project. And maybe he saw my facial expression, because he said, if the answer is no, go away and think about it. So I said, okay. I didn't say no. I went away, but I didn't think about it. I didn't want to do it, so I just kind of forgot about it. And then maybe a couple weeks go by, and he calls me up and says, well, have you decided? Are you ready to say yes? And I thought, I've kind of strung him along. I probably can't say no now. So I said yes. And it turns out to be, it was a great experience. I met people all over campus that I didn't know. In particular, one of the big lessons I got from that, which is not on my slide, but is the importance of staff on campus, which I really, even though I'm department chair, associate dean, how important staff are. And I'm not just saying that because almost all the staff in my college is here. I actually think that, but that's where I learned that. So my lesson from that experience is, don't wait too long to say no. If you're going to say no, don't keep somebody hanging. Just tell them, no, I don't really want to do that, and let them move on to other people. So the next accident, becoming a full-time associate dean. So I was one of 2 part-time associate deans, and that was through dean number 1, dean number 2, interim dean number 3, and then we got a new dean that was picked, and I was with her at lunch. She had already accepted the job, and she was here house hunting. So I'm with her, myself, and the interim dean, and she had just learned on her way to house hunt that The other associate dean said, I don't want to do the job anymore, because we told her we would if she wanted us to. I'm going to go back to faculty. So 3 of us are at lunch, and she's across the table from me, and she looks at me and said, are you going to go back to faculty too? Because if you are, I'm just going to get on the plane and go home. She would have had no senior leadership in the college. And I said, no. And they said, would you be full-time associate dean? And I said, I didn't wait too long to say no. I said yes. And that's how I became the full-time associate dean. My lesson from that is be willing to push yourself. I didn't really know what that was going to be like, but I said, okay, and it turned out to be a very good experience. Worked 7 years as the associate dean under Dean Amy Henley. Next stop on my journey, I labeled this one an incident, just like the previous part-time associate dean, because I actually did apply for this job. I applied and I prepared for the interview. I had 2 people coaching me for interview, giving me, here's some questions you might get. One of my coaches is here in the audience. I said, this time I actually want this position and I'm going to prepare for it. So it's been fantastic as an experience working as interim dean. So in reflecting on all of those, hey, the timer's supposed to be on. How do I know how long I've been talking? It still says 0, 0, 0. What's my clock? Mike? 11 minutes, so I got to stretch. I thought I would be further along by now. I know, Eric, you set the record. And, yeah, for the length of time. Yeah. I know it's not supposed to be, it's not, well, I will note that because I'm filling that out tomorrow. My self-eval. So, all right, so I know it's not supposed to be audience interaction, but I can't help myself. So I've been reflecting on all of those experiences. I tried to think, thinking about all those times when I've had different leadership experiences and all the leaders I've interacted with, what would I think of as some way to characterize some of the characteristics of what I would consider to be good leaders? So I offer you this observation. Good leaders are competent, confident, not arrogant, and cultivate virtue. The first 2 things, competent, confident, I think are kind of straightforward. I want to elaborate a little bit on what I mean by good leaders and cultivating virtue. There's lots and lots of definitions of virtue, but one that resonates with me is, we've only got a minute and a half. We've only been talking a minute and a half. One that resonates with me is this definition. Virtue is a habit of the mind, the will, and the heart, which allows us to achieve personal excellence and effectiveness. It's from it looks like it was cut off. I did have the author's name, Alexander Havard, who's written a couple books on virtuous leadership. Virtue is a habit of the mind, the will, and the heart, which allows us to achieve personal excellence and effectiveness. There's lots and lots of virtues we could talk about, so I was trying to think of what I would offer as virtues that you might cultivate as a good leader. And my first stop in thinking about it was the classical virtues of Plato and Aristotle, the 4 cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. And I thought, I'm just going to talk about one. I want to focus on one virtue, which is fortitude or courage. So I have this definition of what that means, and that's also the quote from the next slide, so you can't see it. This is something from a book by Francis Fernandez. Thomas Aquinas teaches that this virtue, fortitude, is manifested in 2 types of acts: to do good without wavering at the prospect of the difficulties and dangers it may entail, and to resist evils and difficulties in such a way that they do not lead us into despondency. The parts that are in italics are parts that were in italics in the original source. And some of that kind of just is common sense, do good and don't do bad. But the part that in particular resonates with me, do good without wavering in the prospect of the difficulties and dangers it may entail. Any leader will have to make decisions that they know are right, but that are kind of tough and other people aren't going to like them. And so having the fortitude or the courage to do the right thing, even in the face of opposition, I think is important. But one of the things that this same author notes is he follows this up, which is a little bit maybe esoteric, with some practical advice, which is the following. Each day presents us with many opportunities for practicing courage. Overcoming our moods is one of them. Avoiding useless complaints is another. So too is persevering in our work when we feel tired. Smiling when we find it difficult to do so. Correcting people when necessary. Starting each job at the right time. None of these is easy. Just actually being competent and confident, doing the job in a way that is effective can be very difficult, but it's courageous to do so. And then I want to add one other characteristic or one other virtue that I would recommend, and that is joy or cheerfulness. We have a leadership summit in our college every fall, and a few years ago, one of the keynote speakers was, who was it? Greg Page. Greg Page, the former CEO of Cargill. And he was talking, did a fireside chat with our former dean, and he was talking about how one of the things that he recognized as the leader of a big corporation is when he would go into the office every day, his mood, whatever his face said, that translated to everybody in the building. If he came in thinking about a problem or something angry he heard on the radio on the way in and he was distraught, his lack of joy transmitted throughout the whole building and everybody seemed to have a bad day. If he came in and was joyful, was cheerful, it made a very big difference to everybody in his organization. So I heard that, and that's something that stuck with me. So I offer that as well as a lesson. So just a quick recap. The slide doesn't have them all. It's up there? Oh, okay. So all the other things that I thought were missing were still up there? That wasn't in the practice. Hate it when that happens. So recap of all the things to mention. Interviews matter. Prepare for them. When you're asked to do something, answer the call. Interviews matter. I had to learn that twice. Probably need to learn that again. Don't wait too long if you're going to say no to somebody. Be willing to push yourself as a leader or in growing in leadership. Be competent and confident. Be courageous and cheerful. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Sorry, everyone, for all the tech issues there today.
So how long was it actually?
You were at like 19 minutes and 10 seconds.
I cut a minute off my practice time.
You did really good. That was great. And again, thanks to everyone for coming. Join us on February 25th when we welcome the head coach of the UND football program, Eric Schmidt. Have a great rest of your week.